Ole Miss easily gets past MTSU as we all expected. Let's instantly overreact.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ole Miss got past MTSU, and there's a lot of interesting things that happened. We're going to talk about all of that stuff in a little bit. But first, I do want to let you know, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. We're bringing you the inside scoop on all things Ole Miss Rebels. Today, we're celebrating a big win as Ole Miss took care of business against Middle Tennessee, cruising to a decisive 52-3 victory. They covered as well. The Rebels keep their playoff dreams alive, and boy, did Henry Parrish shine with a career day rushing for 165 yards and finding the end zone 4 times. Jaxson Dart was great again, completing his first 24 passes, and we saw a healthy dose of that beloved 12 personnel. We'll talk about that as well. Stick around for in-depth analysis, key takeaways, and what this means for the rest of the season. It's all here on Locked On Ole Miss. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or even Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy, have different perspectives about college football, the SEC, Ole Miss even. So be sure and check them out as well. So really interesting stuff in this ball game. It was a situation Ole Miss easily took care of business. We're going to talk about the stats and things that you need to know about in just a second. But Ole Miss took care. Jaxson Dart, like I said, 24 consecutive passes. If you go back to the Furman game, he completed 30 in a row. That is more territory that Ole Miss fans have not seen. Passing the ball, he threw for 377 yards. They ran the ball at will. The only thing that I'm going to nitpick on, and we're going to talk about that in the second segment of tonight's show, is the defense kind of went through a lull in the middle part of the game. The last drive of the first half, the first drive of the second half, they let MTSU hold the ball for 7 minutes. They ended up getting a pick and stopping the drive, but let them keep the ball. We talked about how they have a tendency to be able to put drives like that together if you allow them, and they were able to do that. But Ole Miss was able to cover 52-3 as well. Let's look at today's stat line, shall we? It was really interesting stuff. Nicholas Vadiato for MTSU, the quarterback, he had a pretty good day. Not anything great, but he ended up throwing for 209 yards. He was basically their entire offense. He did throw the interception at the end of the game. Running the ball, they ran the ball for 28 yards. Ole Miss held them to 28 yards. The rush defense that Ole Miss has at the moment is fairly elite. Jaxson Dart was 25 of 27, 377 yards. Austin Simmons got in the game, 2 for 4 for 20 yards. He looked more comfortable, honestly. And probably it should have been a touchdown at the end of the game. He threw a pass up to Nareel White. Henry Parrish Jr. averaged 11.8 per carry, 14 carries, 165 yards. Rashad Amos, 2 carries for 45 yards, had a 42-yard run against MTSU as well. Matt Jones had 11 for 32 and a touchdown. He had a weird hit-and-miss type ball game. We wanted to see him play a little bit earlier. He did that, but it wasn't exactly the explosiveness that we've seen at the end of the game. So we'll see. I think he still deserves carries against Wake, and to see if he can, I don't know, do a little bit more. Ulysses Bentley did not play in the first half. I do not know what happened there. It felt like there might have been maybe a suspension. I do not know. It was just weird that he just did not play in the first half. He played a little in the second half, had 5 carries for 13, didn't do particularly well. Something's going on there, and we'll see exactly how that goes. Dominic Thomas had 2 carries for 7 yards as well. Ole Miss ended up rushing 42 times for 258 yards, 6.1 yards per carry average. Trey Harris had 9 catches, 130 yards. Juice Wells had 6 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. Caden Lease, 4 for 64. Caden Priestcorn, 3 for 48. Jordan Watkins even got on the act at 1 for 28. Henry Parrish had him. Ole Miss had, as a team, had 397 passing yards. Jaxson Dart did end up fumbling the ball once. It was recovered by Ole Miss, though. The Ole Miss did not lose that turnover. The leading tackler in the game was TJ Daugherty, who is an undisputed kind of leader of that defense as well. It's something to pay attention to because he is absolutely the leader of that defense. And then you look at the other statistics. Chris Paul had a tackle and a half for loss. Trey Washington, a tackle for loss. Trey Omis won. Yam Banks, 1.5. Suntaran Perkins won. Tyler Banks won. Princely Amon Mielen won. He also had a sack in the game. And J.J. Pegues as well. Ole Miss ended up with 9 tackles for loss in this game. There's a pick by John Saunders in the end zone as well. And Micah Davis had 1 punt return for 11 yards. Caden Priestcorn was pretty good as well. Pretty interesting stuff. Let's look at the team stats real quick before we get into it. For Middle Tennessee, 18 first downs. Like I said, the middle part of the game, the defense got flat. And it took the interception to kind of wake them back up. Ole Miss was good on third down, held in Middle Tennessee 4-14, only 279 yards given up, 251 through the air, 28 on the ground. In the red zone, they didn't give up much of anything. They just gave up the field goal. They had the pick. They had a stop on downs. I think Middle Tennessee was like 0 for 4 in scoring touchdowns inside the red zone today. Ole Miss on third down was 7-9 efficient. They were 0 for 1 on fourth down. That was that last one where Austin Simmons threw it up to Nareel White. 655 yards of offense, 397 passing, 258 rushing. Penalties, kind of not clean there. There was a couple of things that were a little bit odd, a couple of grabby pass interference, and Ole Miss had the ball for only 26 minutes in the game. Like I said, Derek Mason, we all know how he does. That he knows how to scheme up games like this. He just doesn't have the personnel to do it. I said this game was going to look a lot like the Ole Miss Vandy game in 2014. This is exactly what it did. I predicted 52-7. It was 52-3. So pretty interesting stuff, really. Jaxson Dart was unbelievable today. He was. He didn't throw the touchdown passes. He didn't do any of the stuff like that. But what Jaxson Dart did was keep the chains moving in a very unselfish way. He had 2 touchdowns accounted for, ended up throwing for about 377, something like that. But like I said, it was 25 of 27 in a long touchdown to Juice Wells. The one that was the incompletion that broke up his streak, I think Jaxson Dart had the longest completion streak in SEC history and was like 1 or 2 short of the national record. And he did have 30 if you want to go back to the Furman game as well. The offense was a well-oiled machine. The questions that Ole Miss fans had about the run game coming into this game, that was answered. Henry Parrish played very, very well. Matt Jones, like I said, the average was a little bit down, and I still have no idea what's going on with Ulysses Bentley. He is far more explosive than he has been looking in the first 2 weeks. I just don't know. So we will see. Rashad Amos had a nice run at the end of the game, and Dominic Thomas did as well. Ole Miss has options at running back as well. I'm completely not worried about the running back situation for Ole Miss. So we'll see exactly how that goes and exactly how you can look at what's going on. You know, on my quad box right now, I do have the Wake Forest Virginia game. Wake Forest is probably going to get a win against the Cavaliers. They're up 17-3 in the second quarter, but Virginia could just be awful. I'm not 100% sure if they're any good at all. The defense looked a little bit flat if you want to look nitpick of what's going on in the middle 8+ minutes of the game. But that was probably normal. And Ole Miss got some red zone work. And the red zone work is the important part of this game. And Ole Miss was elite in the red zone tonight. There was no chance Middle Tennessee, you figure one of those touchdowns would be scored. There were no touchdowns scored. So we'll talk about that as soon as we come back. You know, when you're hiring for your small business, you need to find the right professionals, you know, people who will truly grow, are truly going to fit your role and help your business grow. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. I've personally used LinkedIn to find some top-notch candidates. The platform really makes it easy to filter through and find quality people quickly. LinkedIn just isn't another job board. It's a network full of professionals you will not find anywhere else. And the best part is those professionals, most of them, don't even go to other job boards, but they might see your posting on LinkedIn and say, hey, that is the perfect job for me. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So they don't visit other major job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're probably missing out on the best candidates. 86% of small businesses find a candidate within 24 hours. That's fast. And honestly, it's what you need in today's job market. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, a new partner of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast is College Corner, your one-stop shop for all things Ole Miss. You know, today's game day was awesome. It was a red game. Ole Miss fans were rocking the red. Next week, it's going to be a different color. You'll be able to pick up whatever you need at College Corner. Whether you're gearing up for football, baseball, or basketball, College Corner has got you covered. They're located off Sisk Avenue, right across from the new Chick-fil-A, and getting to the store is a breeze, and there's a ton of parking. And for those of you out of state, no worries. Visit collegecornerstore.com where they turn around orders lightning fast. Trust me, this isn't just a pitch. College Corner is where I get all of my Rebel gear. So visit collegecornerstore.com or stop by College Corner today. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before the season kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC Squad. The show on Thursday night was fantastic. You can get it all from Locked On stable of college football experts by subscribing to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast or Locked On College Football podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoffs? Which team will cause chaos in their conference? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure and follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's pick some nits and talk about some areas that we can kind of get concerned about. The last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 7 minutes of the second half. That was about 11 minutes of game time. You want Ole Miss to put together 60 minutes. Ole Miss was up 38-3, I think, at that point, and they ended up going up 45-3. But in between there, that 10-minute period, the defense kind of got a little bit flat. It just did. And Ole Miss defensively allowed MTSU to complete some passes, get some first downs, not run the ball. They couldn't run the ball. That was not an option. But they were able to find some success in the pass game, especially through Holden Willis, the tight end that they were using. And it's interesting that they have that tight end because last year they were an air raid team. That's the reason they're so proficient being in a situation where they have to throw the football. Well, it was because they were an air raid team a year ago, and that is their comfort zone. So Holden Willis caught some passes. He was a matchup problem a little bit, and he's probably going to do some work in Conference USA this season. He might honestly be somebody to look at in the transfer portal in the future because he was a really good player at the kind of flex tight end position. But Ole Miss's defense got a little flat during that period, allowed those first downs to happen. The time ticked off the clock. It's like I said going into the game. If you allow MTSU to get some first downs with the way they want to play, they're going to be able to use these new clock rules to their advantage and kind of run them down. And them doing that, that's exactly what happened. Ole Miss ended up picking off a pass after a 7-minute drive down into the red zone. Ole Miss was elite tonight in the red zone. I don't think anybody even realized. Middle Tennessee hit the red zone, I think, 4 times or something like that. They walked away with 0 touchdowns. And they walked away with 0 points 3 out of the 4 times. Now, nobody's calling Middle Tennessee world beaters, but that's impressive. And normally everybody else is going on, gives up a touchdown in that situation. If you look at Notre Dame today, Notre Dame got beat by Northern Illinois. And how about all those writers that put Notre Dame in the top 5 after a suspected victory over Texas A&M? How about that? That was pretty awesome, right? Yeah, and exactly what happened. Thank you, Notre Dame, for losing your way out of the college football playoff today. Our path got a little bit easier there. Or think about what happened on the Plains today. Auburn went in as a 14-point favorite in a game, ended up dropping the game at home to California. Justin Wilcox got the win. Auburn laid the egg that they always do. You can count on that happening. So all of that stuff happening, when Ole Miss can get in the red zone and do this, when other teams, obviously ranked teams, supposedly good teams, struggle, like Oregon last week against the Idaho Vandals, struggled, it's nice to be able to keep people out of the end zone. And Ole Miss through 2 games this season is 128-3. That's their scoring differential, 128-3. Now, it's going to get a little bit tougher. It's a Power 4 game on the road in Winston-Salem next week. That will be interesting to see. Will Ole Miss break out their shiny new uniforms? Probably, if we're going to be honest about it. But we'll see exactly how that goes. But Ole Miss kind of got flat in the middle part of the game today. They didn't give up a ton of yards. They gave up a total of about 270 or something like that, 28 yards rushing. But they allowed Middle Tennessee to kind of control the clock. The game kind of got played on their terms because of how explosive Ole Miss was. And even though they made a concerted effort to run the ball today, running for 258 yards and it looking a ton better than it did a week ago, it still looked a little bit flat. That is going to be the bad taste and the sour taste that Ole Miss fans take this week. The same way that against Furman, they came out and just constantly talked about the run game. This week, they're going to be talking about those middle 10 minutes of the ball game. Like I said, just a little bit flat. They're going to be fine. They were winning 38-3 and 45-3. And once the interception happened, the energy got back injected, and all of a sudden they were just as good as they were. And then when the very, very bottom of the roster entered into the ball game at the end, there's a quarterback for Middle Tennessee that had about 40 yards completions, and they also broke off a decent run at that point as well. Pretty interesting stuff. We'll see what happens, and we'll see exactly how this goes for Ole Miss after this game. I think if you look at this team right now, they're exactly where you want to be. There's really nothing you can complain about. Well, unless you want to. But 128-3, that's ridiculous. If you look at Jaxson Dart doing historic numbers through both games, doing things that have never been done, that's something to look at as well. So we'll see exactly how that goes. All right, when we come back, we're going to spend the last 13 minutes of the show talking about your comments about a 52-3 win in week 2. Stick around for that. You know, Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets. You know, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipts, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. You know, there's not a bad seat in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, but today was probably the last time to get a reasonably priced ticket into Vaught-Hemingway. Even I think Georgia Southern is pretty close to a sellout at this point. So you're going to need a secondary market. And let me introduce you to Game Time. They take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in the history of Ole Miss, I might even be able to help you out with tickets as well. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's take comments and see exactly what you thought of the game today. Should be pretty good. And let's see. We'll start off. Jake Mitchell, another great performance. But to nitpick, where were Ivy and Perkins again? They were in the game. There was a lot of short, quick passes, and it made it to where Nick Viato or whatever his name is, he was able to get the ball out of his hands. They had the weapons. That tight end was really good. Viato and that tight end were really good players. And because of that, they were able to move some chains and all of that. They're going to be fine. 28 yards rushing today against a team. Derek Mason is from that Stanford system. If you remember what it was like in the early 2010s with the David Shaw run the ball, all tight ends on the field and a running back, that type system. He likes that. They had 28 yards rushing or something like that. So that's interesting. Moments of Truth podcast. I can't wait to start SEC play. You and me both. Jake Mitchell, Dart's a monster. He is. He absolutely is. Over under 5.5. For how many times Steven says it's a situation to where? Well, that's one. It is a situation to where you should be pretty good. Yeah, I say that all the time. It's one of my crutch phrases, honestly, if we're going to be real. Mark Walsh, I was going to say the same thing. Perkins was a 5-star and doesn't do anything. He seems too small. Perkins is going to be a star, and he's going to be able to do things whenever they do more exotic stuff. Perkins is never going to stand out when Ole Miss is doing base defense. If they're playing vanilla stuff on the defensive side of the ball, obviously the stuff that is going to be scheming to make Perkins an effective weapon is not going to be there. So if Perkins is just playing as a 210-pound defensive end, yes, the offensive line is going to be able to do that, because if they get their hands on him, they'll be able to control him pretty easily. The difference is going to be whenever Ole Miss starts scheming up what to do with their linebackers and defensive ends as the season goes on. Whenever the playbook gets opened up, Perkins is going to be the biggest beneficiary. Mike Vandergrift, good things when Great Danes cover. Don't know about that. We all rooting against Colorado tonight? Probably. I think so. Let's see. They're all talking about Perkins. Definitely root against Colorado. Thoughts on the secondary? Seemed almost complacent. They did. They got flat in the middle part of the game. That's what I talked about. They got real flat, and whenever that happened, Otto was a good quarterback, and that Willis kid was a really good tight end, and they were able to get some first downs. They still were very elite whenever they clicked on in the red zone. There's no getting around that. Between the 20s, MTSU was able to do some work in the pass game, not in the run game, in the pass game. And also towards the end, there were third teamers on the defensive line, even though there were starters in the secondary, and that's going to change things. We'll see exactly what happens there. Mike Biggs said secondary wasn't playing hard until MTSU got in the red zone. That is absolutely correct. They played flat in the large part of that game, and that's okay. That's actually a good thing. Ole Miss just won a 52-3 game when the defense did not look engaged. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. Now, you don't want to see that happening over and over and over again, but in this game, they did exactly what they had to do. Tampa Zeke, what's with our D-line being completely unable to get to their quarterback? They had one sack, and the other team was just max protecting and getting the ball out of his hand quickly, and that is a very mobile quarterback. It's not – Ole Miss isn't going to scheme up exotic blitzes against MTSU. They were going to let the front defenses handling everything and do simple red dogs from the linebacker position. They were not going to overly scheme stuff up and put it on film for Kentucky against Middle Tennessee. They didn't have to do that. They won 52-3. Titans Mafia, Dart's a pro. His reaction to his one incompletion today says it all. He had an elite day and was disappointed in one incompletion. Pro mindset. Yeah. I talked about this last week. Jaxson Dart is the most locked-in player I've seen from college football since Joe Burrow in 2019. He is completely locked in right now. And that is a very, very good thing and something to look forward to. I'm pretty fired up about that. Kalen Dempsey said, what about Walter Nolan? I saw Walter Nolan after that walking around on the sideline laughing with his teammates. So whatever you want to look at, whatever you want to see what's going on, they're not going to talk about injuries. They're not going to do it until they have to do it in the Kentucky game, which is still 3 weeks away. But if you look at the TV broadcast, there was no trainer around him. He was walking around and he was laughing with his teammates. That has to be at least a good sign. But if anybody wants to freak out, feel free to do that. NIU beating Notre Dame and South End and getting paid $1.4 million by the Irish for the privilege had to be the high point of the day. No, the high point of the day was when Hugh Freeze decided to let Derek Nix apparently call the plays for the Auburn Tigers today. And Auburn looked like absolute booty cheeks, period. They looked awful. Tampa Zeke says next week is red too. Thank you very much. Daniel Adams says, hey, on our way back from the game, and the defense did look flat. Looked like they got held a lot on the O-line too. Yeah, I do think the officiating, there were sympathy calls from time to time for MTSU. All the benefit of the doubt went to MTSU. There was a pass interference that absolutely had no business being called. But that's okay. They were getting blown out. They did not want another blowout like that, and they just felt bad for that. Douglas Sherman, what is wrong with Bentley? I don't know. I wish I knew. But it felt like Ulysses Bentley was suspended for the first half. I don't know if he was, but it felt like that because he absolutely didn't get into the game at all. Matt Jones got every one of those players, which is great. I wanted that, for everybody, just so everybody knows. But I have no idea what's going on with Bentley at the moment. Rebels should be moving up at least one spot this week. They should be moving up 2 or 3 spots because Notre Dame had no business being in the top 5. Game plan by MTSU, get the ball out quick, bunch set, go outside with run, quick throws. No worries about the D-line here. Major worry is about Walter Nolan. Is he okay? Josh from Taylor. Like I said, I saw him talking with his teammates, walking on the sideline and no trainers after the injury. With that happened, he probably just got shut down. We'll see. David Chambers says, people got to remember Ole Miss is still playing very vanilla. Why put anything on film? Mark Walsh says, love your analysis, Stephen. Thank you. Hotty toddy, you're welcome. Dean says, good win. I stay nervous for some reason. I'm not sold on Austin Simmons, Dart, and Harris. I'm sure are going to miss them. Poor old Notre Dame. Cash the Real Saint says, just back from the game, the vibe was great and Parrish was great. Yes, obviously nobody's going to be complaining about the run game this week. Muddy Redneck, I'm late to the party. What's the word on Nolan? I'm from Tupelo, Mississippi, but watch the game on my phone from Dodge City, Kansas. Life of a truck driver. Like I said, after the injury, Walter Nolan, I saw him on the sideline walking around joking with his teammates. That's all that. After that, Lane Kiffin is not going to talk about Walter Nolan, but you have to take that probably as a good sign. And Rex Thompson says running game looked great today, but the O-line is going to be fine. The O-line still has injuries on the front, and the full O-line has not been seen. When Jerquan Scott comes back, when Kalen Worm comes back, you're going to see a different unit on the offensive line. That is the way it goes. Now, just to let everybody know, this today, Locked On has requested that I keep all my reaction shows and live streams to 30 minutes or less, and that is because of the 24/7 streaming channel and using it on it so they can program the show because our show is doing so well. So we're going to do that, but we're going to have a live stream tomorrow night. We're going to have our reaction roundtable. So tune in at 7:00 Central tomorrow night, and Tuesday night we'll have one as well. So we'll see exactly how that goes. I'm very fired up. Ole Miss is exactly where I wanted them to be right now. It might look a little bit different. It might have been set up a little bit different than I thought it would be, but it was exactly what Ole Miss needed. And I'm pretty fired up going through there. It's a situation to where Ole Miss fans can be very excited. 128-3 through 2 games. And I guarantee you there's going to be people that figure out a way to drop Ole Miss down in the polls. Anyway, enjoy this night. Watch all the games. The Tennessee-NC State game is going to be a lot of fun. Should be a lot of fun. I will talk to you later. Show tomorrow, reaction roundtable, and Monday's show, what we learned, should be pretty good. And then we'll put the Middle Tennessee game to bed. Take care. We'll talk to you later. Hotty toddy.